The case I'm about to read out is about one man, but it could also be symbolic of the courage of a whole nation. I'm talking about the former mayor of Kherson in Ukraine, who was held captive by the Russians. And I think this shows two things. It shows his profound courage, which I want to focus on, but also the brutality of the Russian invaders. The just inhumane brutality. There's no other way to put it. Before I get into this, it's a report in the Times, an update about the news tonight from the LNER train. It's a pretty serious situation. 10 people injured, 9 of them seriously. It's been described as potentially life changing injuries um, regarding this attack on a LNER train in Cambridgeshire. The latest news is that it was going from Doncaster to London. Um, I believe the original destination was Newcastle, which would be that East Coast main line. It's a very serious incident. Both Starmer and Badenoch have commented on it. The local MP is involved. It's um, it's a very grim situation. I just hope that those who've been injured pull through, but they may well have life changing injuries. So it's awful. But I'm not going to comment further simply because this is still a developing story, and I'll be looking at updates probably throughout the night. So back to the story I'm talking about. This is a report in the Times, and I was familiar with this case, but this really goes into further details about it. I was familiar with this man's capture. So this is from the Times, October the 27th. I'm just going to read it out because I think it speaks for itself, and like I said, it just shows profound courage. This was a man who could have taken a more comfortable route that would have meant betraying his country, but he didn't. And by the way, I honestly wouldn't necessarily judge anyone in that situation if they did take what would be a more comfortable route. I mean, faced with the sort of brutality that he faced, I wouldn't judge anyone. I will say this though, his courage, what I'm about to read out, is in stark contrast to the despicable, contemptible moral cards living in the West who continue to regurgitate Kremlin propaganda. The same applies to Westerners, in my view, British nationals who support the Chinese Communist Party and other totalitarian regimes. I honestly have contempt for such people, and I suggest they either give up their nationality and just be done with it, defect, instead of being useful idiots for some ghastly, barbaric, inhumane regimes. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, this is the report. It's by Mark Bennett in Kiev. When Volodymyr Mykolaienko, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, any Ukrainian friends, please correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. The former mayor of the Ukrainian city of Kherson was abducted by the Kremlin's forces a few weeks into Moscow's full-scale invasion. They gave him a choice: collaborate or face a lifetime of hell in Russian captivity. They offered me money and security. They told me to choose any position I wanted with the Russian occupying powers, he said. They said that if I didn't agree, I would die in prison. He turned them down, and his refusal to betray his homeland was punished by sadistic vengeance. For more than 3 years, Mykolaienko, 65, was locked up in dirty cells, beaten several times a day, and fed near starvation rations until his release in a prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine in August. Gaunt with haunted eyes, he still has nightmares about his long ordeal. I'm trying to erase these years from my life, he said in a hospital in Kiev. It's hard though. I think I will need a long time to recover mentally. On the morning of the invasion of Ukraine, Mykolaienko, who was Kherson's mayor from 2014 to 2020, enlisted in a territorial defence unit. After Kherson fell in March 2022, he was lured into a trap, thrown into a car boot and driven to a prison. He was locked up and beaten for information about where resistance forces were storing weapons, even though he was just a rank and file fighter. Eventually the Russians gave up and renewed their attempts to convince him to side with Moscow. When he refused to buckle, they put him up against a wall as if about to execute him. I can't say I was scared at all, but I told them I have 2 grandchildren and they will continue my life for me. I surprised myself at that moment. Mykolaienko ended up in a penal colony east of Moscow. His fellow prisoners included Ukrainian troops captured by Russia during the Battle for Mariupol. The beating started on the very first day. They hit us with batons and used electroshockers, he said. They were also beaten for speaking a word of Ukrainian. Some of his torturers, he said, professed to be Russian Orthodox Christian believers. They would turn on some radio program about Christ in the morning and then in the evening half beat you to death. They were fed watery soup, boiled potato peelings and given a slice of bread a day. For vitamins they picked nettles growing under the prison fence. Andrei Yermak, President Zelensky's chief of staff, said on the day that Mykolaienko was released that the former mayor had turned down a chance of freedom in 2022 in favour of a young, critically ill prisoner. When it came to choosing between me and the boy, I was always going to say let him out first, Mykolaienko said. His eventual release came on August the 24th, Ukrainian Independence Day. His wife, daughter and grandchildren remain in Kherson. He is determined to return home. I want to be useful. I'm not the youngest and maybe not the healthiest, but I want to help rebuild the city, and if the need arises, I will be ready to defend it again. As soon as I get out of hospital, I'm going back to Kherson. What a man. As far as I'm concerned, this guy's a hero. And like I said, I honestly wouldn't have been too harsh if he had relented. I mean, technically it would have been a betrayal of his country, but facing those circumstances, it's just it's like the resistance movements in World War II against the Nazis. It really, really is. But this shows a perversion of Putin's Russia, the brutality of that state, whereby you have soldiers professing to be believers in Christ becoming sadistic torturers in the evening. It's a bit like the old stories of Nazi commandants who would, gas people during the day, then be family men in the evening when their houses were adjacent to the camps. I've just got so much admiration for this man, but also such disgust and anger at Russian brutality and those who excuse it. I hope one day that his torturers will face trial for war crimes. Some have, but nowhere near enough. But by saying some have, I mean some Russians have been captured and held to account for their crimes, but nowhere near enough. And the sad reality is Putin, Lavrov, that inner circle of the Kremlin, Medvedev, they will probably escape justice. I don't think we're going to see a bunker-like situation like in 1945, unfortunately. But who knows? Russia has a turbulent history. Who knows what could happen? But it's abhorrent. It's kind of a mixed thing. On one hand, it's admiration for the man's courage. I mean, mentally, there must have been times in those conditions, 3 years, where he must have really felt like he was losing his mind, and the physical pain and the darkness, and it's almost hard to comprehend. I suppose one recent equivalent I can think of is when the Assad regime fell in Syria and those bedraggled prisoners came out, including toddlers. Again, one of the world's barbaric regimes, the Assad regime in Syria. And again, a regime that has no shortage of apologists. It sickens me that there's people out there who are willing to defend evil, really, to defend evil. I hope he can get some sort of effective rehabilitation. I mean, how do you even begin with that? I would imagine that his emotions go from the physical pain, recuperation, mental rage. I mean, how could he not feel rage at what he went through? Anxiety, must be all those things, and yet he could have chosen the path of collaboration. I suppose if he'd done that, how would he have ever faced his constituents again, or his former constituents? But what a choice. What a choice. I've seen pictures of him actually, and before his capture he was a relatively healthy looking middle-aged man with a moustache, a beard. When he came out, he really looked like he'd come out of a concentration camp. Really gaunt, really thin, horrifying, really horrifying images. But He's not alone, of course. There's many other Ukrainians that have shown profound courage. Um, but if anyone is in any doubt about the nature of the Putin regime, they should think about this. Um, Russian nationalists are what they are. They're, products of the society they're in. But to Westerners, to any of my fellow Britons who wants to defend this ghastly regime, may you bow your heads in shame. When I think of the courage of someone like this, and then I think of the absolute cowardice of these people who live in the comfort of the UK, yet spout out Kremlin propaganda, I want to metaphorically throttle them, really. Yeah, no, I wouldn't do it because it's not legal, but I have contempt for such people, really. Total contempt. I think they're absolute moral cards. When they're willing to defend such evil, and then you get the contrast of someone as brave as this. I don't know if I could do it. I'd be absolutely honest. I don't know if I could do it. How many people could? But Time magazine a few years ago named the Ukrainian Spirit as their collective people of the year, and I think that was the right choice. It's I know the local Ukrainian community here well, and we don't tend to go into details about stuff like this, but I've got such respect for them. And there's a few things there that are notable about Ukrainian POWs punished if they even spoke Ukrainian. That's symbolic of a sort of cultural genocide that Russia's perpetrating. This is also true of the kidnapped children. Trying to eradicate a culture is the definition of genocide. That's what Russia's doing. And they have the arrogance to talk about Ukrainian Nazis. It's sickening, it really is. But anyway, I think it's so important that his story is told because it's symbolic. It personifies, yes, he personally is courageous, but it also personifies a people, I think. I just hope one day that at least many more Russians are held to account. And I'm not talking about privates and junior officers. I want to see senior Russians held to account for their crimes. I mean, of course, I want to see Putin languishing for the rest of his days in a prison. I wouldn't. I think executing Putin would be a mistake because it would turn him into a martyr. I think what would be justice is for Vladimir Putin to be arrested and to die behind bars, but it's never going to happen. I'm realistic. I know that. So what will happen? Who knows? There could be an internal coup. Russian hardliners might feel that this war hasn't been effective enough for their liking. They might turn on Putin, and this time it might be more successful than the Prigozhin mutiny. The history of Russia is turbulent. That's possible. But frankly, these men are evil. Putin, Lavrov, Medvedev, I think they're evil. I think it's an evil regime, and I think it needs to be thoroughly opposed. And this just further reiterates that what sort of barbarism takes a man and treats him like this. And it's very notable that the Ukrainians, despite everything they've been through, they treat Russian prisoners much better. There is no equivalent reports on anywhere near this sort of scale of the accusations against Russia. And when there has been one or two trickled through, the Ukrainian commanders have said that they take that seriously. So that contrast should be illuminating to anyone who thinks that this is just two sides bickering. To any MAGA Republican who thinks it's just two Slavic countries having a fight, they really need a reality check. This is Russian barbarism against a sovereign European nation. That's what we're seeing. And on a point about courage, of course, I also hold Russian dissidents in very high regard. Those who have courage as they take on the Kremlin, that goes without saying. But one thing I would say, though, about Ukrainians is they know that they have the moral high ground. So I suppose that keeps them going on some level. But they're still human, and no matter how physically strong and brave you are, everyone has a breaking point. And so I think he will take years of recovery. I just hope he can get some peace in his life. That could be achieved if Ukraine prevails, but these are very uncertain days. But anyway, I want this to be a positive message about human courage.